Everyone, welcome to Cafecito con. We are a show where we invite guests to inform us, enlighten us, and inspire us by sharing about themselves and the spaces they step into and make their own. We are your hosts, Rosa Martin Munoz and Dalila A. Vasquez, an intergenerational duo hoping to bring you conversations about women, with women, and for women. We hope to build a community without borders so that we can express, inspire, inform, and lead to true self-growth. We call our talks Cafecito con, to have an open forum for a variety of conversations and content. We want to share a cup of tea, love, and create spaces for womanhood to chat, to learn, to grow. We want to reclaim our spaces of conversations about each other. We're not gossiping or chismeando. We are compartiendo, sharing our stories. More importantly, we are giving our best to each other. We'll talk about faith, life, business, hopes, and dreams. At least that's our dream. And with that, Dalila, I pass it off to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am thrilled and super excited, as always, to get started on our shows. And this morning, especially because I have a really good friend of mine, a person who has a brain and a way of writing that I admire tremendously. I often tease her that when I read her books, I need Kleenex next to me. I lovingly tell her that her writing is a tear-jerking experience for me because I do cry a lot. But when she writes, she really puts her heart and soul in it. She's a wonderful mom. She's a wife. She is a lecturer. And I am going to allow her to tell us about herself because she does it so eloquently and beautifully. Thank you so much, Reyna, for joining us. Thank you for saying yes and chatting with us. You are helping us celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. And this is one of the ways in which we hope to bring back to the community the beauty of our contributions. So thank you very, very much for joining us.
Oh, hola, Delila. It's so good to hang out with you this afternoon. And thank you, everybody who's joining us today. Yeah, it's so great to just get a chance to chat with you and reconnect. I know I don't get to see you that much, but hopefully we can change that.
Hopefully we can. At least we're seeing each other through Zoom today, right?
Yeah.
So let's get started with the conversation. Who's Reyna Grande? I know a few things about you, but share with us, share with our listeners, who is Reyna Grande? How do you see yourself?
Yeah, well, I think I'm a different person to different people, you know. Like I know I have my readers, my loyal readers who are always very supportive of my work and who you know, like you, like I know you really enjoy reading the stuff I write. But I think if you ask my kids, they'll just say, ah, that's my mom, you know. It's not a big deal.
A good thing, right?
Yeah. It's like, yeah. But yeah, for listeners who are not familiar with who I am, on a professional level, I mean, I'm a Latina writer. I have been a professional writer for 15 years now. I celebrated my 15th year in June. My first book came out in June 2006, I think. Yeah, it's been such a long time. And it's finally getting an audiobook, which I'm really excited about 15 years
Cool.
later. So the audiobook is coming out in December. And it's been just such a rewarding journey, you know, being a professional writer, um, writing as a way to celebrate my Latino community. Like I feel that every book I write is an act of celebration. It's also an act of defiance because it's my way of telling mainstream America that we have stories that matter, you know, that we can contribute beautiful works to American literature, and that our stories need to be read and our stories need to be celebrated. Yeah.
For sure. And you do justice to that statement. I've heard you speak. I've seen you promoting your books. I sometimes had the privilege of proofread some of your work. But I think that the beauty of what you do is that it doesn't stop with you. You're always willing to share, right? So now your books have been translated into various languages. Now they're in the hands of young students and older students. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, I think that that's what makes my job so rewarding is being able to reach a wide range of audiences. And it has been really surprising to me. I wasn't expecting that when I first started publishing my work. I did not expect to have to like learn how to connect with different audiences. Like a few years ago, I went to Rochester, New York. They had picked the distance between us for the common read for the community. And I had to speak from like elementary school kids, fifth graders, to 95-year-olds because they took me to a home, for the elderly. And and then I had to speak to high schoolers, and then I had to speak to college students. And I just could not believe how I had to learn how to connect with all kinds of audiences. And I always find the little ones more challenging because, little kids, like you have to have a lot of energy and you have to like make it fun and interesting. And like you said, I make you cry. I'm not the kind of writer that is gonna walk in there and make the kids laugh and dance and get up and start clapping. I make them cry too. So it's like, okay, like I get all these little fifth graders to cry.
And then Reina, you mentioned connection, learning how to connect with different audiences. And I did look into and read up on the distance between us. And I wish when I was growing up in elementary school, high school, I wish I had any Latino reading. There was really nothing that was required by our classes. And when it came to my applications for college, I didn't feel like I had a story. And I know that if I would have read your books or any other stories of other Latinos, immigrants, first generation, I would have felt like I had a story. You need that representation. And connection is a huge piece to that. I would have connected to your literature in a certain way that I don't connect to Eurocentric books that we've had to listen to. And as far as connection, I know I had an experience in college. I'm first generation. My parents immigrated from Jalisco, Mexico. And so my experiences were not that of an immigrant. I did not immigrate, but my roommate did. And so experiencing college with her as an immigrant, her as a DACA recipient, connecting with her, learning about her experiences really helped me empathize with her. And so you do need to connect and learn about others in order to relate in some way. So I do appreciate you sharing about that connection. And one of the things that I did see is that you're going out there talking about your experiences with people that have no sense of what it means to be a Latino, whether it's an immigrant, first generation. So I do commend you for that. I'd love for you to continue sharing about that. I just wanted to interrupt for a second and share that piece.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting point. And what you're sharing about that you're the child of an immigrant. And that's basically what my children's experience is, right? And one of the things that I really love is hearing from children of immigrants, because I I hear from immigrants themselves who read my work and they tell me, oh, I saw myself in your writing. And I really appreciate that because I know how important it is to see yourself on the page, you know? But I also love to hear from children of immigrants because it makes me feel good that through my work, I'm able to help these children understand their parents a little bit more or to appreciate like where they come from, you know, and to honor that, right? Honor their the experiences of the generations that came before them, to stay connected to their culture and to never forget, you know, that they come from immigrants. And I really want that because I feel that once we start to lose that connection to our immigrant roots, that's when we kind of get into that, you know, trouble in terms of people turning against immigrants, even though their own parents or grandparents were immigrants. So yeah, I definitely want to push against that.
And you do a great job. I mean, as Rosa shared, you help validate our stories, right? Because we have so many different stories and so many different ways in which we arrived at this point, and we have flourished, or we have struggled, or we have accomplished what we have accomplished. And then at the same time, you help immigrants, and as you mentioned, the children of immigrants, carry on with that heritage in celebrating the history. I really love the way you put it, that for you, it's a celebration of our history. And right now it's prime time for that. I mean, the Department of Ed instituted a new, or opened up a window for us, at least here in California, right? For Hispanic history to be part of the curriculum of education. I mean, whether we have a plethora of books or whether people are aware of the plethora of books that we have available, at least that window is open. Have you been contacted by the state? Are your books going to be part of that curriculum here in California? Or because I see you going all over the United States doing the promotion and presenting. What about home?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been contacted, but I do a lot of events in California schools. And, you know, 2 weeks ago, I did a presentation for Los Angeles County of Education. So I am active here in California, although of course I could always do more and, you know, reach out to more California students. But I actually just got a book contract to write a middle grade history book. So
Nice.
we'll see. We'll see.
So are you going to use a compilation of your stories into that? Have you given it any thought?
No, I'm gonna use the research that I did for my novel, for A Ballad of Love and Glory, you know, all the research I did on the Mexican-American War. And I'm going to talk about the effects of that war on the Mexican community here in the United States.
Yeah. And that's your newest book, right? That you're writing, or is it published already?
No, it's done. It's coming out in March.
Uh-huh.
I just turned in the final edits 2 days ago. Although I still want to keep editing it, but you know, my publisher away from me, and they're like, "You're not gonna get it again," because every time they send it to me, I make a bunch of edits, and then they're not happy. So they're like, "This is the last time you get it," and that's. But yeah, the novel's done, and I am so proud of this book. It took me 7 years.
Wow.
To write it, but I mean, I don't know if I should say 7 years. I started it in 2013, but then I put it away when I did the young readers version of The Distance Between Us. And then I put it away again when I did A Dream Called Home. So I keep putting it away and putting it away. But last year, you know, with COVID and I was here at home, and I was feeling a lot of stress and anxiety and frustration and worry, you know, like all the things we were experiencing together. I just channeled all of those emotions into this book, and I got it done. Like I
Wow.
finished it. Um, it really helped me grow as a writer because it's my first historical fiction, and it kicked my butt. but it's
Yeah.
good. I love it. Love it. I can't wait to share it with you.
I can't wait to read it. But I also want to make a comment. I mean, this is different for you because you usually take your personal experiences into your books, right?
Yes, yes. But I needed this book because after writing memoir, I was like, emotionally exhausted,
Mhm.
just like being so vulnerable on the page and exposing myself in a way that's like just scary.
Yeah.
So that's why I love fiction, because then when I switched to work with into the to this novel, it gave me a chance to not be the protagonist of the story. It gave me a chance to create these two characters and to write about them and their own trials and their own traumas. So that was really nice. And then, of course, I really wanted to write about the Mexican American War because I'm just so pissed that we never talk about it, that children don't grow up learning about this
Hmm.
war. Um, and I just feel that, as a Mexican immigrant, I would have loved to have known about this war when I was growing up here in California, because just knowing that California used to be part of Mexico, knowing that Spanish was spoken here long before English, it would have really helped my self-esteem and
Yeah.
and in
Absolutely.
knowing that I'm not an outsider.
Yeah. No,
I,
there are nuggets of history that we should have available to us. Like you said, California, even when it was US territory, was bilingual. That's how California, and that's how LA was set up to be, right? We've lost some of that for many reasons, but it's important to know that that's how it started, so that we don't feel that we need to shed parts of us to fit in. Like you said, have your kids read any of your books?
uh, yeah, well, they read The Distance Between Us, and Nathan read Cross Under Mountains also. He really likes that book. And actually, right now, he's at community college, and The Distance Between Us is the required reading for his English class. And he's enjoying it because he's like a
Like
rock
a
star.
star?
Yes, because all his classmates are constantly asking him questions about me. And yeah, he's just enjoying that.
I wonder if he's going to ask you if you can come and speak on it. That is just awesome, that he gets that experience, and it's to actually be very close to the author.
Mhm.
Yeah. Not only that, right? I mean, they know their culture, and I know that because we have a personal relationship. They know their identity. They know their mom is a writer, but they're also enjoying the experience of being American. They travel with you. They have this glamour experience of life that is so different to the one that you had growing up. Do they talk about
Yeah.
that, or do
Yes.
they?
Well, yes. I have to confess though that I really struggle with that,
Hmm.
because sometimes I feel like an outsider with them because their childhood is so different from mine. And I know I'm the one who's giving them that childhood, but at the same time, I just feel like I'm on the outside looking in. And I remember,
That's interesting.
I actually wrote an essay about this because, like, I remember when I was a teenager reading Sweet Valley High, and how I always wish that I had that kind of life, like the middle class life with parents that were together and successful parents, right? Like working professionals. I don't know. And then with my children, like I try to give them that life. I try to remove all the obstacles that I encounter, like you know, as an immigrant, being low income, being a first generation college student. I mean, I had a lot of obstacles to overcome, and I try to remove all of those from my kids' lives. But then that means I can't relate to my kids sometimes. You know, I mean, they're growing up upper middle class American kids who get to go to freaking Europe, you know, over the summer,
Oh,
to Hawaii. We just went to Hawaii in this summer, and they get experiences I never had. I mean, my father couldn't even afford to take us to the movie theater down the street, you know. So sometimes I do feel somewhat disconnected from my own kids in that I cannot relate to their experiences. Whereas my husband, who grew up middle class, that's his experience. So he doesn't have the problem. I do.
have you all visited Mexico, or I mean, are you able to connect them to that at all?
Oh yeah, no, I take them to Mexico as often as I can. Um, Especially to my hometown. You know, I really like taking them to my hometown because I want them to see like the poverty that I experienced as a kid, and it's good for them, you know, to see that, to
Absolutely.
experience that. It helps them to understand me a little bit more, I think. But I also try to take them to other parts of Mexico because I don't want them thinking that that's it, right? That Mexico
Yeah.
is just like really poor and full of shacks and dirt roads. So I've taken them to, you know, Mexico City, to Puerto Vallarta, to Cancun, to
Ooh.
Veracruz. Yeah, I try to take them to different places in Mexico.
I think that's amazing and important. I grew up spending summers at my grandfather's ranch in Mexico and seeing how my cousins were growing up and living. And because of those experiences, I did become very, very grateful for everything that my parents were able to provide. And it's something that I hold on dearly and really try not to forget. So if you do that together, I'm sure there um, I mean, you feel a bit disconnected from them sometimes because they have all these luxuries, but I'm sure they feel connected to you and your story and admire you so much more for that and everything that you've been able to overcome for them.
Sometimes it's hard. I understand you, Reyna, because I mean, I have the same challenge, right? I come from South America. So South America is a little bit further than Mexico. So we can't just drive down there. You get in there, it's a little bit more expensive and more complicated. So my kids didn't get to go growing up. And I remember when they were younger, you know, I will talk about Ecuador and the things I remember and I wanted. And for them, it was just so foreign that it really didn't matter. And then when we finally went to Ecuador, I mean, they fell in love with the place, with the family, with the love. And it really has nourished that distance that I understand you talk about. You know, we are kind of the observers of our kids because their experiences are so different. And your kids are still kids, that they'll be grown-ups someday. And then you'll see that, you know, not giving up our identity has a value in their life. I think that the hardest thing or the more regrettable thing is when parents give up their identity to conform to where they're at, right? And they nourish the experience. They live in the present, sort of speak, because they feel that there's no need to visit the past. But I think that there is a connection between the roots and who we are now that is also important to be mentioned. So I know that you do a lot more than just take him to Mexico. You have an abundant garden. I've seen pictures of it. I knew your garden here in LA when you were down here in Downey. I haven't visited your garden up in Sacramento, but I've seen the pictures, and you bring those experiences alive to them. Do they help with the garden? Do they work with you? How does that transform in your
Well,
family?
you know, Eva used to love being with me in the garden. I mean, you remember Eva when she was
Yeah.
little? She was always outside with me. We spend more time outdoors than indoors. And I taught her which plants she could eat. So she was always making soup with like different flowers and feeding them to her dolls. And then we had that really beautiful experience of raising monarch butterflies, right, from the garden. And that was just really beautiful. So she loved gardening with me. And then she became a teenager and that ended.
But remember, we used to talk about that. I used to tell you, they get invaded.
Last year, I had to pull out the fairy garden because she doesn't go out there anymore. She's done with fairies. So now it's a strawberry patch. Yeah, so no more of that. That little girl is gone.
Yeah, she's a stinky teenager is what I used to call my kids.
Yes, yes.
So what is she into these days? Is she into beauty, to fashion?
Yeah, she's starting to wear makeup, and she just asked me to teach her how to shave her legs. So that was a rite of passage that just happened. And she's into brushing her hair with like all kinds of braids and stuff. And she's a young lady, you know?
Yeah.
She's a young lady. And I want to enjoy the stage of her because I know that it's important for a teenage girl to have her mom, right, to guide her and help her along with that. So yeah, I mean, I miss the little girl, but I'm gonna try to enjoy my señorita.
Yeah, no, it's important. It's important for us as mothers to grow up with our kids and learn when is it that we step in, when is it that we are observers, and you're not there yet, but the time will come when all we can do is accompany them, and pray and hope that they invite us to the table because it's their life and we want to be part of it, but it has to be with an invitation, right? It can't be with an imposition. And you have plenty of nieces and you have your sister and you've had your own experiences with your mom, so you have resources to tap on to see what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Do you think about that often, or you're just going with emotions now?
No, I'm already planning for when I'm an empty nester, so don't feel sorry for me.
Okay.
I already have my plans. 5 years from now, when Eva goes to college, I'm out of here. Like, I already know what I'm gonna do. So I'm not gonna, like I said, like I really enjoy my children, but I never hover, I'm not a helicopter mom.
Excellent.
I always give them their space, and they really appreciate that. And even Eva tells me all the time how much she appreciates that I don't hover, because she has friends whose moms do hover all the time, and she gets to see that. And she tells me all the time, she's like, Mom, I'm so glad you're not like that. I let her be. I let her be who she wants to be. And the same thing with Nathan. So I feel like I have a really nice relationship with my kids, but we're not codependent.
Excellent.
I taught them to be independent, and I'm an independent woman, and I think we're gonna be okay.
No, I wasn't worried about that for 1 minute.
No, well, I know, but I know women who are so attached to their children that they go through a very traumatic experience when they're empty nesters, and then they don't know what to do with themselves. Their whole identity has been tied to their children and to being mothers, that then when the kids are gone, it's like you have to reinvent yourself, right? And it's scary. And I know it's scary for some women, but it's not going to be scary for me. I got this.
I'm so happy to hear that.
I am so happy to hear that. Also, I'm not a mother yet, but I know, watching my own mother, she was one of those cases that you mentioned. Her world has turned upside down now that we've all left the house, and really struggling with mental health and all of that. And it makes me worry because I don't want to have to worry about having kids. I want to be able to let go to a certain extent and still be me and still enjoy, have my own identity. And so that makes me really happy to hear that right now. We'll throw you a party.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do it. I mean, it really is. And it's a fun way of living life and encountering life from that different level, right? So, Reyna, with all that we have said, I think that we touched on your purpose because you talked about celebrating Latinidad through your writing and putting it forth. This new book that is coming out has history in it, and you've done some research. You've traveled to different places of the world, not just Mexico, right? To be able to put it together. You mentioned that you wish you had something like that to read when you were younger. But what was your inspiration? Was it your own need, or were you thinking of new generations? Was it a more global impact that you were looking at when you were writing? How did that come about?
Well, this new book, when in 2013, I was at a book reading in New Mexico, and somebody came up to me and they asked me if I had heard of the St. Patrick's Battalion. And I said I had not. And the St. Patrick's Battalion is a company of deserters from the US Army who switched sides to fight for Mexico. So I came home and I Googled them, and I learned about John Riley, who was the leader of the St. Patrick's Battalion. And I started to read more about it. I learned that, in the US Army, 50% of the US Army back then was foreign born. A quarter of them were Irish. And because of the discrimination that these soldiers were experiencing at the hands of Native officers, the Irish, the Germans, the Italians, I mean, these immigrants were not wanted in the 1840s when they were immigrating, especially the Irish. And they experienced so much abuse and discrimination that they started swimming south across the Rio Grande, and many of them ended up in the Mexican ranks. So I became really fascinated by their story, and I started to write about John Riley. Like, I started to write chapters about him. And then as I was researching, I came across a poem by John Greenleaf Whittier, and I was living in Whittier at the time. And Whittier is named after John Greenleaf Whittier. And he wrote a poem in 1847 about this Mexican woman named Jimena, who's out in the battlefield tending to the wounded. And I became really fascinated by Jimena. And I thought, well, who is she? How did she end up in this battlefield? Who did she lose during this war? And anyway, she became my second protagonist. So the novel is told in 2 points of view, with Jimena and John Riley. And it's a love story, it's a love story between Jimena and John Riley. It's a war story. So I'm writing about the time during the US invasion of Mexico, which led to Mexico losing half of its territory. And it's an immigrant story because I write about John Riley's immigrant experience from Ireland. And I try to give him my father's experience, because my father, when he came to California, he left behind his wife and 3 children, and he came here looking for work to send money home, and he left us in extreme poverty back in Mexico. And that's John Riley's story. He left his family behind in Ireland, and he came here looking for opportunities. And at the time, Ireland was going through a famine, so thousands and thousands of people were dying, literally dying of hunger. So I try to think of my dad as I was writing John Riley's story. And also, my dad fell in love with a nurse's assistant while he was here. He ended up leaving my mom for her, But John Riley doesn't do that, but he does fall in love with Jimena, who is an army nurse. So there's another similarity.
How cool is that? Real life experiences into the history that is also real and part of what we don't know, right? Because history is supposed to be a narrative of what happened and how we got here. But as you mentioned earlier, the history that is taught in the US has a lot of empty pockets. So how great is it that here it is, even if it is not a history book, even if it is a novel, something that you are pulling together from your experiences, your wishes, your knowledge, your research, it at least gives that seed for us to wonder, right? What else happened that we don't know about? And how else did history unfold that we're not aware of? So I hope that is another one of those books that makes it to the hands of students.
That story is so powerful, especially because John Riley, being an Irish immigrant, technically he's European and still being a marginalized group. And I know, reading up on history, there was a ton of racism against Irish, Italians, and I mean, hatred is hatred. And so you see those themes across. It shows that it's not just Latinos, it's a lot of people.
The history of the United States is definitely filled with people coming and enduring, and there is a lot of blood shed in the history that is not shared. So it's great to have those nuggets, because they're little pieces, right, of history that have been the little offerings that come into our hands. Let's share with our audience a little bit about your other books that I think should be read. One, because folklorico is definitely part of the resistance, right? It's part of staying present to your heritage as you move through the streets of the US life. And then there is a history, your memoir, that gives us even a deeper connection or understanding of what that experience can be like.
Yeah, my first book, like I mentioned earlier, was Across 100 Mountains. And that book was my senior project when I was an undergrad at UCSC, majoring in creative writing. So I wrote part of the book there in Santa Cruz. And then when I graduated, I continued working on it, and finally managed to get it published in 2006. So after that, I started to write Dancing with Butterflies, and that's the one about folklorico. And I really wanted to write a book about folklorico because when I was in Santa Cruz, the campus had a folklorico group, and I had never been exposed to folklorico before. So I joined the group, and I was so far behind because a lot of the girls there had been dancing forever, and they were like, they could dance really, really well. And I felt so insecure because I was barely learning like how to do a zapateado but when I wrote Dancing with Butterflies, it gave me the opportunity to pretend I was a wonderful dancer through my characters, because my characters are really great dancers. And I read a lot of books about dance. I read memoirs too, dancer memoirs, because I needed to learn to capture that vocabulary, how a dancer expresses herself about her body. And it was really fun to write that book because I went to a lot of folklorico shows, and that was my research, was going to all these awesome folklorico shows. So after that novel, that's when I switched to writing memoir, and I did The Distance Between Us and A Dream Called Home, and now I'm back to novel writing with A Ballad of Love and Glory. So that's it. And I have another book coming out in June next year, but this is an anthology that I co-edited, and it's essays and poems and artwork by undocumented Americans, and it's 44 pieces. in this anthology, 44 contributors. And it was a really beautiful project because I wanted to create this space for undocumented Americans to be able to, share their experiences. And the whole book is all the contributors are or were undocumented. The two co-editors, me and Sonia Winyansaka, we are formerly undocumented also. And then the cover design was also by an undocumented American. And you know him, Delila Elias Roldan.
Oh,
He did the cover
wow. How cool is that?
for the anthology. So this
Uh-huh.
the whole project is, I find the whole project to be really beautiful.
That sounds awesome. My daughter did some work in her studying of sanctuary and what sanctuary cities and states mean for immigrants.
Mhm.
They gathered individuals who were living here in the IE without documentation, and they promoted the writing of their stories. And there is a healing part that comes with that. So how awesome it is that you are collaborating in something like that, not just to tell the story, but to give people the opportunity to heal themselves from the wounds that come from living that life. I mean, I myself was undocumented at one point, and my mom used to tell me when I would go to college to watch out for any vans that didn't have any windows, and that if I saw any of those at the bus stop, to find shelter. So when I was a consultant for the FITS for Head Start, and I had to go to El Centro to provide services to the programs there, coming back, I had to pass immigration, right? Because there's checkpoints. And I remember having to hold down to my federal badge and have it ready, because without failure, I would always be stopped. Everyone else around me will just go by, zoom by, but it didn't matter. I always got stopped. So there are ones that stay, and I'm a citizen now, but I still have some moments when I think, okay, do I belong here? Is it safe for me to be here? But experiences like that, the one that you're putting together, allow for healing, and it heals the individual, but it also heals the community. If we feel safer, our kids are going to feel safer and more empowered. Are there any stories there that you heard, that you're aware of, that you want to share just a little peek of?
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to be making the official announcement for the anthology next month in November, and we're going to reveal the cover and
Awesome.
the contributors. And the anthology is called Somewhere We Are Human, Authentic Voices on Migration, Survival, and New Beginnings. And like I said, we have 44 contributors. And yeah, these pieces are really powerful. Like, we divided the book into 3 sections. So there's the migration section, where some of our contributors write about their journey, right? Their migration journey to the US. Some of them even wrote about reverse migration, where they chose to go back to their native countries, or they were deported. So that's forced migration. And then the second section is survival, and that's the longer section. And everybody writes like different experiences of trying to survive in the United States. And then the third section is new beginnings, and they're focused the pieces on people like starting new lives and trying to move beyond these labels of being undocumented and borders. Such a beautiful anthology, and I can't wait for June to come around so I could share it with you all.
Where are you having the unveiling?
Because there's 44 of us, I think what we're gonna try to do is to have to do the cover reveal and the contributors list, like on social media and all that. But then when the book comes out, I'm really hoping we could do like a lot of events like throughout the country.
So, it always painful to get to this point where we're just getting towards the end of our show. But before we do that, one of the things that we ask our guests to talk about is the spirituality, their own spirituality. So what's your spiritual life like? What I know you and I have had conversations.
I don't know how to answer that because, when I was growing up in Mexico, I was a hardcore Catholic because that's how I was raised by my grandmother. She was very, very Catholic, and we went to church with her all the time, and we were always praying, and she had an altar at home that, we're praying to La Virgen de Guadalupe and all of that. So Catholicism and religion, I was really like immersed in religion back then. But then when we immigrated and we came to Los Angeles to live with my dad, he was not interested in any of that. And we would ask him to take us to church. Imagine like little kids asking
That's odd.
to go to church. And we would ask my dad to take us to church, and he didn't want to. So sometimes we would take ourselves. We would walk all the way from, from Avenue 50 to like Avenue 61
Wow.
to St. Ignatius Church. We would walk, and because we wanted to like keep that connection alive with our grandmother. I mean, we had left her in Mexico, and that was the only way we could stay connected with her, was through our religion. So we would go to church to pray. But of course, being little kids, like little by little, all that walking got to be too much. And then we got distracted and we stopped. Like we just did not continue that tradition anymore. So it's interesting because nowadays, like I don't consider myself a practicing Catholic, but all my characters, whenever I write, all my characters are like hardcore Catholics. And even in this new book, A Ballad of Love and Glory, Jimena is so spiritual and religious, and she's a curandera, like my grandmother.
Oh.
So she's so deeply connected to like nature and to the spirit and all of that. And it's just really beautiful that even if my life is not as spiritual, that I still get to tap into that whenever I write. So it's still there. But like you mentioned earlier, I do have a garden. And to me, like that's my spiritual space, because I'm out there tending to my plants. And it's so beautiful when I like plant seeds and then they germinate, and I just feel so connected to nature and to that beautiful cycle of life, and just watching a seed turn into a beautiful plant. Like it's just amazing. So that to me is my safe space where I get to go and just be with myself and my thoughts, and to just tap into that spirituality. Yeah.
I do know that you are a very giving and a spiritual person. I've experienced that from you, and the love that you share with your kids and the thought that you put into the things that you do with your family show that. And thank you for being with us, spending time with us. If we were to pick one of your books, we could probably spend a couple of hours just talking about them. But I do want to encourage our listeners to check out your books. I would put handles in our publication when we do the YouTube release of this show, so that people know where to see you and how to contact you. But please do share, where can people find Reyna Grande and how can they follow you?
Well, yeah, if you want to drive to Woodland, California, that's where you'll find me. But otherwise, just check out my website at reynagrande.com. And I try to update it often, where I put like upcoming events that I have that are open to the public. And then, yeah, hopefully you can make it to one of my events. I've been doing a lot of virtual events as well, you know, so wherever you are, like you could always just join us on Zoom. And hopefully next year we can start doing a few more in-person events, because when A Ballad of Love and Glory comes out, I really hope I can go on book tour and meet people in person. That's something I'm really hoping for.
And I want my autograph book. So we'll go to closing our show then, and thank you to our listeners. Then keep us company and listen to our conversations, which are always enlightening. I mean, where else can you find conversations with women and among women that show the paths of the so many different professions and experiences that we are entitled to have, the places that we can step into?
We typically like to end the conversation with a quote. And Reyna Grande, can you share that quote that you had showed Dalila and I earlier to end off the show?
So here's the quote. We do not remember days, we remember moments. By Cesar Pavese. Do not remember days, we remember moments.
So for the rest of us, keep remembering our moments and celebrating life. Cafecito Con is a production of two intergenerational women who hope to bring you conversations with women for women. You can listen live every other Thursday at noon by connecting with us via the Clubhouse phone app. You can download the app and look for us by our name, Cafecito Con. You can follow Cafecito Con to get alerts to our new coming shows. You can listen to previous shows by visiting our Facebook page at 2 Cafecito Con, and it's all one word, at number 2, CAFECITOCON, and click on the watch video button on the top right hand of our page. Feel free to comment. Keep in touch, and until next time.